have the experience of getting into an argument with anyone in the corporate world in terms of like working upstream as opposed to creating a fork or just mindlessly blocking employees from being able to get involved upstream.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I call them arguments. Like at CoreOS, do we contribute to Docker or do we just start Rocket, which was a competing container runtime at the time? And so you would say, look, we need to stick with Docker because that's the ecosystem. While we're right about System D having more capabilities as something that can manage processes over where Docker was at the time, should we really have Rocket? And look, we did it anyway, but then we deprecated it and it made sense full circle. And so one thing I've learned as I matured over time is that being right is not as important as getting consensus. So if people have some fear about whether we merge our changes upstream or keep a proprietary fork, that's a point in time decision. And so I usually just write down what I think is true and maybe why I disagree, because what I've noticed is things will change. Like, hey, we're going to maintain a fork for these reasons. But then something happens where upstream does something so different that the fork becomes stale. And now you can't even benefit from those changes. Oh, also, some of those changes are key security changes. Also, some of those changes allow you to use the new hardware. So you still want to stay with this fork or not? And now you have another point in time to revisit this. And so to me now, I think about these things as just temporary checkpoints. I'm right, but won't win today. We'll revisit this in 2 years. But also, I always have this phrase I used to say, different company, same team. I don't need to be right here and go somewhere else and work on what I want to work on. The reason why I left PuppetLabs was largely because I think I was right about something at the wrong time. At that point, most of the config management automation tools were written in Perl, Python, or Ruby. End of story. That was it. Golang comes out. And I'm like, whoa, it solves a lot of issues. We don't have to distribute this runtime separate from the actual thing we're running. No global lock interpreter, so we can actually do things with multiple threads. Who could imagine? And the usability of a single binary was mind blowing to me. And I remember refactoring one of Puppet's core components called factor. So in order for configuration management to work, you need to know something about the node. And this little component written in Ruby would just gather facts and send it to the server so you can make decisions. If Red Hat, yum install Apache, no problem. But factor requires Ruby to be on the server. So you got to install Ruby first just to have factor do anything. And so what version of Ruby do you have? Aha, that's tricky. Because if it's a Red Hat box, you could have an older version of Ruby than the latest release of Ubuntu. So as an engineer, I got to focus on both versions of Ruby. And also, sometimes I can't even use something that would make things better because the older systems don't have the version of Ruby I need. So you just can't do it. So Go comes out and you can distribute statically linked binaries. That changes the landscape. We can support a cascading array of systems, including things like network switches, where you may not even be able to load Ruby runtime on it. So I wrote this thing, and people were like, no, we can't be using Go because it doesn't work on Solaris. Here's the Solaris and AIX rendering its head again. Doesn't work on those, so we can't adopt it. And I'm sitting there like, what? And then Docker comes out written in Go. Terraform comes out written in Go. etcd comes out, a key value store database written in Go. I'm like, guys, the world has changed. And that wasn't something they wanted to do. So I left. And part of me leaving, I open sourced my first project, the first major project, CompD. It was a configuration system, lightweight, that leveraged Go, pulled its values from etcd, and just did things in a different way given the world of containers and soon to be world of Kubernetes. I knew in that new world, we weren't going to be copying files to individual servers anymore. These things would be way more self-contained. And all you would need to do then is really focus on the config file, not how you install apps. So maybe that was a dispute that I think I lost. I don't know if it was an argument, but I did try. I showed the evidence. I built the prototypes. I thought I told the best story I could, but the world's a big place. So I left to pursue it.
I think that's a very important thing that you're pointing to, and I do share that experience, and it's a very interesting way to look at it. Like I could think about my days at Ericsson where I talk about what I failed with as a failure, or I could look at it that I wasn't wrong. What I was saying, it was right. But in that department at that particular point in time, the people were not ready. And the department, that part of the company wasn't ready and things were not lining up well, not about who failed with what. So I think
And the
that's
truth
a very
is,
good.
the Labs team made a good decision. Do you know how hard it would be to now you got to maintain both stacks for a number of years? It's just not that easy where you get to just, even if a new idea shows up, that you get to retrofit it. And I think that's the struggle of open source because open source is continuously making changes upstream, solving various needs of the world. And sometimes you have to consider backwards compatibility. But in open source, we get the ability to start brand new projects that have no ties back to the way we currently do things. And not everyone's going to be on the same opportunity train to take advantage of those. So you got to find your way. So I think it worked out well for everybody involved, including me.